Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion, and we are continuing the Everybody Loves Raymond reviews. Now, when it comes to Frank and Marie's marriage, at this point we've learned a little bit about them, seeing how long they've been together, gotten their dynamic, seeing that obviously Ray is the favorite child between them, see that they both do love their children, even if they do favor Ray. Each have a weird relationship with Deborah to differing degrees. But we haven't learned a lot about their past, other than how long they've been together. And of course, the fact that Marie's relationship with her own mother-in-law mirrored the relationship she has with Deborah. Only, her in the daughter-in-law role and Nanny Barone in her role. Well, here, we learn a little bit of a snippet about their past. And this, of course, is the episode Anniversary. Now, as the title suggests, it involves Frank and Marie's anniversary, their 40th, which is a big one, especially in the modern era, because divorce is a lot more common now. Well, that's because it seems back in the day that marriages would last mainly for the kids, that whole mindset. Not all of them, but they would. I mean, I'm sure there are still ones that last nowadays, but usually they fall apart a lot more easier. But then there are ones that lasted due to communication. And while Frank and Marie do bicker, they do communicate at times, as we see, and they do love each other, and they do work things out in their own way. And of course, it's never gotten physical where one's, smacked the other. If it got to that point, I have a feeling their marriage would not have lasted 40 years. And it would have been an episode where it's, to quote a wrestler, if I can get serious for a moment. Oh, the episode begins, as a lot of these episodes do, in Ray's house. Ray, Deborah, they're talking. Ray finds out that it's his parents' 40th anniversary. And the first thing his thoughts turn to, which is logical considering it's a big milestone, is there going to be a party? And Deborah's like, really? I'm supposed to set up a party? Because it's an unspoken thing. Because obviously Ray's not going to do the party. And then the moment he mentions that Deborah's supposed to do it, then Robert comes in to return an item. Ray brings it up. He's like, is there going to be a party? Deborah doesn't want to do it, so the boys start to do it. But their party is more like a half-ass party. As Stone Cold Steve Austin probably put it, a man's party, with just chips and all that, and be like, hey, congratulations. Deborah decides, fine, I'll do it. And she starts setting out to do a proper party instead of the chip fest as she has it. And it turns into a proper party. First, they take Frank and Marie out to a nice little anniversary brunch to get them out of the house so that Robert and Amy and their invited guests can set everything up and surprise. And when they get back, even though it's supposed to be a day of celebration, Frank and Marie are in their usual selves, bringing everything down, saying that their marriage is nothing to celebrate, which right then you're like, what? Why is your marriage nothing to celebrate? Then we find out from Frank there was a point where they almost got divorced 30 years before. So right when they hit the 10-year mark. And from there, Ray just can't let it rest. So even with the surprise, and everything, Ray has to find out. Which is a nice little moment when they walk in and everyone yells surprise. And Robert with the little, Yoo! And then he starts to do a speech. Which if there's one little error, at least with when the episodes are placed, that comes out here is at the end of the speech that we actually hear Robert says the word wedlock. Which as we find out in a few more episodes, that is an apt word to use when it comes to them. But that is not for a lot of episodes. That is episode 19 when that comes into play, and this is only episode 6. So I don't know if they had that idea in mind when they were writing this one, so they just decided to throw it in as an Easter egg, whether that script was written or not, and they threw it in as an Easter egg. But I guess you could say here it's unintentional foreshadowing. He was probably going to use it in an ironic context, and it was cut off, and we never found out what the rest of the speech was, other than Robert being annoyed that Ray interrupted his speech just to hear a story that, as Deborah eloquently puts it, could have waited till after the party. I mean, we never see the party proper, so we don't see how Ray was during the rest of it. And we get the story out of Frank and Marie that it all started from one incident where they were eating dinner, the kids watching Wild Wild West on TV. Frank takes a sweet time coming down. He wants salt. Marie, as is her nature, overreacts. He knocks the dinner on the floor, she kicks him out, and he takes the salt with him. And what makes this scene very enjoyable to watch is twofold. One, there is a filter over it to give it a semi-retro feel, but also the fact for this scene, Ray and Patricia play Frank and Marie. And just the way they're all made up in it, the moment you see them come out, you just gotta laugh. Seeing Patricia Heaton and the Marie hairdo wearing the type of outfit, and then seeing Ray Romano come out with the bald cap, a little bit of a pudgy belly, doing the Peter Boyle mannerisms. I mean, obviously it's narrated over, so we don't actually hear how they would have talked as it. Well, it'd be a couple seasons before we actually get them doing a comedic impersonation of the characters. But seeing them do it here, it's like, yep, I believe them as the younger versions. Even if that's not exactly how they looked, as a stand-in to represent the flashback, it works. And the actors that play flashback Ray and Robert, I think they do decent jobs. I think the one that they got as Robert looks more the part than the one they got Ray. And that's because the one that they got as Ray, I don't see him growing into Ray, just from the facial features. I care the ones that play him. We have Ethan Glazer as young Robert, which, other than this, the only other things he did were episodes of Sequest 2032 and The Amanda Show. Daniel Hansen as young Ray went on to have a slightly better career because he voiced a character in a Disney movie. He was Lewis in Meet the Robinsons. I would say that is a slightly better career when it comes to profile, but they haven't really done anything major since then. And while we do see them play physically, but I think the other reason I think Ethan did a better job is because through his body language and some of his reactions, you see this as a younger Robert, especially when he's getting jealous and he's like, come on! Like in the second flashback when Frank comes back and he's like, I could totally see older Robert reacting like that. Maybe not as animatedly, but more with like his subtle facial changes, and then probably a line like, unbelievable. Just the way that Brad Garrett would sell it. Once the flashback ends and the party ends, Ray feels guilty about the whole thing, as he is, as we've seen from previous episodes. Even if it's something that isn't his fault, like we saw in the Neighbors episode, he feels guilt-ridden. It's just the way that his parents have raised him. And then with this, when he finds out that because of his broken arm in the second part of the flashback, his parents got back together, even though it was unintentional at first, he just feels guilty. He's like, they could have gone out, they could have met other people. He's also not said, he's probably thinking, I could have had step-parents that could have toned them back a little bit. We could be in a better position. So many what-ifs. What if? Two of the most dangerous words that you can muse on. What if? And that's what really throws Ray's whole sanity into imbalance during this latter half. Deborah tries to help him figure it out, and she even poses a question that he has to muse on, and that is, there has to be, it's more of a statement, but there is a slight question, that element to it. There has to be a reason other than your arm why that marriage has lasted 40 years. Which is true, as we see in the little scene. It's just, like I've said before, at the beginning part of this episode, they just have a dynamic among them. They love each other, they just have a weird little way of doing things together, and we do see a little bit of that when he goes across the street and sees them working together. Nice little callback to the whole salt thing. And of course, peppers. And then Ray goes to talk with Robert, and we find out if there's anyone that should be having guilt about this, it is not Ray. Because his broken arm, not an accident. Robert sabotaged his bike that caused him to fall. He went over the handlebars and broke his arm. And of course, the way Ray talks about it is like, I could have been killed, I went over the handlebars. Which, with how small Ray is in the flashback, is a possibility, but it's like, unless you were going at quite a clip downhill or some other thing, I don't think you die for flipping over the handlebars unless you went at an angle and your neck broke. Or you were in front of a vehicle. But with how we see the bike fall apart, I think more than likely he probably got up to a little bit of speed, the thing went off, and he just went down and landed at an angle to where it snapped it. So that's just him throwing out hyperbole. Which, of course, Robert does counter in a slightly dark comedic manner. Well, I thought of that. Then Dad would have come to the funeral. Which I have to admit I do laugh at, but I love dark humor. That's just me. And then after that, for the epilogue, Ray has to ask every little thing that he can think of if it was Robert or actually happened. The only one that Robert mentions that is bad is a dart in the leg, but turned out to be an accident. But the one that really sells it is the end question where it's like, the time I almost drowned. Because think about it. If he hit him in the dirt with a leg on accident, and then set up an accident on a bike to get the parents to come back together, which that was Robert's motivation, because Dad was away so long, he figured, oh, he'll come back if you have a little accident. and that is him. But you got to see why Ray is thinking, well, if you set that up, he might have tried to drown me. But the thing that I really love about it, they never continue on with it. It's just implied with the dialogue, is that maybe there was a time Robert actually did do it. Because his question after that is, lake or ocean? And the moment we hear lake, he's like, you. So it's like, Robert, did you try to drown your brother in the ocean even as a gag? Oh boy, that would have been fun. But then Ray just lets it be. He's probably thinking, I don't think I want to know. Especially he's a cop. He's an NYPD sergeant. He's a supervisor. He can make crap happen. I don't want to know. This is another episode that is written by Cathie Ann Stump, who wrote some of my favorite episodes of the series. I Wish I Were Gus, Diamonds, The Letter, and Traffic School we'll see later in the season. And of course, on one of my favorite ones from season 4, Never Make Something Good. Wah, 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 as Ray would say. And the thing I love about her episodes is that they're always family-centric. They always have a central conflict involving the dynamic. They're always entertaining. And they always have a little bit of drama that adds to some minor character development that in a show that actually carried forward a lot of this character development, it probably brought up a lot, other than once in a while for a gag. But due to the nature of sitcoms, it isn't, which is a shame. And from what I've seen, she mainly is written for sitcoms, which is a shame. I would like to see her do a more dramatic show, but she adds some dramatic flair to a comedic show, so it works. And as I say, some of my favorite episodes of the show are written by her. And this is one of them. And it's another episode where we get Phil Leeds as Great Uncle Mel. It's the second of his 4 appearances, which he has 2 more throughout the end of this show, which one of them is the season finale, and then he would pass away, which is a shame because I would love to have seen him in some of the season 3 episodes, but he was old at this time, so he has some of my favorite little one-liners. I was told there'd be widows here, but his first line is what steals the show in that little scene. Just a little brief moment before they kick him out of the kitchen. You got any decent scotch? That question, in a way that Phil says it defines Mel's character. Great Uncle Mel and his childhood innocence. Amy is there during the party scene, but all she is there for is to say a couple lines and hold the cake. So just stand there, look pretty with sweets. Waste of her talents, but it's nice to see her for this scene. Lee, Stan, and a couple other minor characters are in the background, but they don't really have any dialogue other than background party chatter. It's nice to see them, though. They're mainly mentioned. This is also the first mention of Albert, one of Frank's friends, who would go on to be played in a couple episodes by Ray Romano's real-life father, Albert Romano. And he actually has a funny little back and forth with Frank in a later episode where he says, I knew him when he was just gassy. But nice to see his first mention. I don't know if they had planned to have Albert play it by this point, but it's there. Just like in an episode later on in this season, we see a police lieutenant played by Ray's real-life brother, which is nice to see his real-life brother outrank his TV brother. All in all, this is a pretty fun episode. Nice bit of drama, nice bit of comedy. Nice to have some of Frank and Marie's marriage fleshed out, especially the past. See that there is more to it, and that even though we're wondering, like, okay, they almost split in the first season from a little fight, we see that that has happened before, and it also makes you wonder, how many times does stuff like that happen? Like, even if it was just like a day like that, and has it gotten to the point where, even before that one, like, Ray and Robert were just desensitized to it? Because at one, when they bring it up, Robert's like, again? And of course, going to the next episode, we transition from interesting family dynamics with the grandparents to interesting family dynamics among Ray and Deborah with their marriage, combined with Ray's job as a sports writer and the long hours that career entails. Till next time, guys.